Picture the scene. It is a Friday afternoon. The fluorescent lights of your office hum quietly overhead. Your colleague, sitting 2 desks away, just brought in 2 boxes of expensive pastries. Everyone is clapping. They are patting him on the back. He just closed on his first house. A beautiful, 3-bedroom suburban home with a 2-car garage and a manicured lawn. He is 30 years old, and according to the unwritten script of society, he has officially made it. He is a success. Then, the conversation shifts to you. Someone asks when you are going to stop throwing your money away on rent. They give you that familiar look. It is a mixture of pity and condescension. They repeat the same tired mantra that has been hammered into our collective subconscious for decades. Renting is just paying someone else's mortgage. When you buy, you are building wealth. You smile politely, you take a pastry, but you do not argue, because you understand something that they do not. You understand the math. You understand the psychology. And most importantly, you understand the invisible chains that your colleague just willingly wrapped around his own wrists. Today, we are going to tear down the romanticized fairy tale of homeownership. We are not going to tell you a comforting bedtime story. We are going to put your bank account and your colleague's bank account on the autopsy table. We are going to dissect the cash flow, the hidden traps, the psychological warfare, and the true cost of those brick walls. By the end of this, you will know exactly who is truly throwing their money out of the window. Let us start by looking closely at your celebrated colleague. He believes he just bought a house, but that is the first major lie. He did not buy a house. The bank bought a house. He just purchased the exclusive, highly stressful privilege of paying for it over the next 30 years. The first concept we must demystify is the illusion of the monthly payment, specifically, the trap of the amortized loan. Let us say your colleague bought a $500,000 home. He put down $100,000 of his own hard-earned savings. That leaves a mortgage of $400,000 at a 7% interest rate for 30 years. His monthly principal and interest payment is roughly $2,661. In his mind, he is putting $2,661 into a giant piggy bank every single month. He believes he is building equity. He believes he is getting richer. But pull back the curtain on the amortization schedule. In the very first month, out of that $2,661, roughly $2,333 goes straight to the bank as interest. Only about $328 actually goes toward paying down the principal. Let that sink in. He just handed the bank over $2,000 in pure profit just for the privilege of borrowing their money, while putting barely $300 into his own so-called asset. For the first 10 years of his 30-year sentence, the vast majority of his payment is nothing but interest. He is essentially renting money from the bank, and the landlord is ruthless. If society claims that paying rent for an apartment is throwing money away, what do you call paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in unrecoverable interest to a massive financial institution? It is the exact same thing, just dressed up in a tailored suit and called a mortgage. But the deception does not stop at the interest rate. There is a fundamental rule of real estate that the middle class actively ignores. When you rent a home, your monthly rent is the absolute ceiling of your housing costs. It is the maximum amount you will pay that month. When you buy a home, your mortgage payment is the absolute floor. It is the bare minimum you will pay. Your colleague feels like a king in his new castle, but the crown is heavy. 6 months from now, the water heater will violently rupture at 2 o'clock in the morning. Water will flood the hardwood floors. As a renter, you would simply pick up your phone, call the landlord, go back to sleep, and let someone else drain their wallet to fix it. But your colleague? He is the landlord now. That emergency plumber who charges $200 an hour? That comes directly out of your colleague's pocket. Then come the invisible, recurring bleeders: property taxes, homeowners insurance, maintenance costs, homeowners association fees. These are not investments. These do not build wealth. They are pure, unadulterated expenses. Financial experts agree that you must set aside at least 1 to 2% of the home's value every single year just for maintenance. On a $500,000 house, that is $5,000 to $10,000 a year, vanishing into thin air, just to keep the property from slowly rotting back into the earth. And then, there is the most dangerous trap of all, the liquidity crisis. Fast forward 5 years. Let us imagine a severe economic downturn hits. The corporation you both work for announces mass layoffs. Both you and your colleague lose your jobs on the exact same Tuesday. Your colleague is terrified. He has a house that has appreciated in value. It is now worth $600,000. On paper, his net worth looks fantastic, But you cannot eat net worth. You cannot pay the grocery store with bricks. You cannot slice off a piece of your kitchen countertop and hand it to the hospital to pay a medical bill. His wealth is entirely trapped, suffocated inside a concrete box. He runs to the bank to beg for a home equity line of credit to survive. But the banker looks at him with cold, dead eyes and says that because he does not have an income anymore, they cannot lend him money. He is sitting inside a $500,000 asset, yet he is completely broke. He is asset rich, but cash poor. He is starving on a mountain of gold. Furthermore, the house strips him of his mobility. The ultimate power in the modern economy is the power of the feet, the ability to move. Suppose a rival company in a different state offers a position that pays double the salary. As a renter, you give your 30-day notice, pack your bags, and leave. You seize the opportunity. But your colleague? He is paralyzed. He cannot simply leave. He has to list the house. He has to hire a real estate agent who will demand a 6% commission. On a $600,000 sale, that is $36,000 completely wiped out in one signature. He has to pay closing costs, stage the home, and pray that the market is favorable. If the market is down, he is trapped. If the neighborhood suddenly builds a waste management facility down the street, destroying property values, he is trapped. He traded his geographic freedom for a false sense of security. And yet, despite all of these catastrophic flaws, we must be brutally honest and objective. We must acknowledge the one single reason why the average homebuyer still ends up wealthier than the average renter at the end of 30 years. It is not because real estate is a magical, unbeatable investment. It is because the mortgage acts as a flawless, unforgiving mechanism of forced savings. Human beings are inherently weak. We are deeply undisciplined. If we have extra money, we spend it. But the bank does not give your colleague a choice. Every single month, the bank puts a financial gun to his head and demands payment under the threat of foreclosure. Because of that brutal coercion, your colleague is forced to relentlessly funnel money into his property, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. The house acts as a financial prison guard, locking away his money so he cannot waste it on new cars, designer clothes, and expensive vacations. He is not a genius investor. He is simply a hostage who was forced to save his money. Now, let us turn the spotlight onto you, the quiet, observant renter, the one who did not seek the validation of an office applause. While your colleague dumped $100,000 into a down payment and threw away another $15,000 on closing costs, origination fees, and taxes, you kept your capital. You held onto your $115,000. This brings us to the most powerful force in the financial universe, a force that the middle class completely ignores. Opportunity, cost. Money is a living, breathing entity. When it is locked inside a brick wall, it is dormant. It only grows if the entire market decides the dirt underneath it is worth more. But when you hold cash, you hold ammunition. Instead of burying that $115,000 in a foundation, you deployed it into the stock market. You bought broad, low-cost index funds. You bought shares of the largest, most profitable corporations on the planet. You effectively bought a tiny piece of the global economy. And the magic does not stop there. Let us look at your monthly cash flow. Your rent for a comparable home is $2,000 a month. Your colleague is paying $2,661 for his mortgage, plus another $800 for taxes, insurance, and maintenance. His true monthly cost is nearly $3,500. You have a surplus of $1,500 every single month. Because you are financially awakened, you do not use that $1,500 to buy a luxury watch. You do not use it to upgrade your car. You systematically, ruthlessly invest that difference into your portfolio every single month. Let us fast forward 20 years. The compound interest on your original $115,000, plus the relentless monthly injection of $1,500, growing at an average historical market return of 8 to 10%, turns into a staggering sum. While your colleague is proudly staring at a house that might be worth $1 million, a house that requires constant repair, a house that still traps his wealth, you are staring at a liquid portfolio worth over $2 million. And your wealth is alive. It is perfectly liquid. If you get sick, you can click a button on your phone, sell a fraction of your shares, and have $50,000 in cash deposited into your checking account in 2 business days. You do not have to ask a banker for permission. You do not have to pay a real estate agent a commission. You hold absolute, undeniable power over your capital. If your landlord becomes unreasonable, you move. If the roof caves in, you call the property manager and go to a hotel, while they fix it on their dime. You are purchasing a service, a roof over your head, and you maintain the ultimate leverage, the ability to walk away. But this is veil finance. We do not deal in fairy tales. We do not deal in motivational speeches. We deal in the brutal, unfiltered truth. And the truth is, your path, the path of the renter, contains a fatal flaw. It is a flaw so dangerous that it destroys 99% of the people who attempt it. The fatal flaw is your own psychology. Remember the forced savings mechanism that saves your colleague? You do not have that. You have no warden. You have no financial gun to your head. When you have an extra $1,500 sitting in your checking account at the end of the month, the temptation to spend it will scream at you. The marketing algorithms will target you. The car dealerships will offer you 0% financing. The travel agencies will show you pristine beaches. The societal pressure to look rich will slowly infect your mind. If you lack a titanium-clad discipline, you will not invest that difference. 25 off. You will spend it. You will experience lifestyle inflation. You will use the freedom of renting not to build an investment empire, but to fund a slightly more luxurious illusion of success. And if you do that, the math completely turns against you. Because while your colleague's mortgage payment is locked in for 30 years, your rent is not. Inflation is a silent predator. In 10 years, your $2,000 rent will become $3,000. In 20 years, it will become $4,500. If you reach the age of 60 and you have not built a massive investment portfolio to generate passive income, that inflation will crush you. You will be at the mercy of landlords, facing skyrocketing rents on a fixed income with no equity to your name. The freedom of renting is like walking a tightrope over a bottomless canyon. If you have the balance, the focus, and the cold-blooded discipline to invest the difference without fail, you will cross the canyon and reach a level of liquid wealth that the homeowner can only dream of. But if you slip, if you give in to the temptation of consumption, you will fall into the abyss of lifelong poverty. So, we place these two opposing philosophies on the ultimate financial scale. How do you make the decision? You must eliminate emotion and look at the brutal variables. First is the variable of time. The transaction costs of buying and selling real estate are catastrophic. Between closing costs when you buy and agent commissions when you sell, you will lose roughly 8 to 10% of the property's value in friction. Therefore, the unbreakable rule is this. If you do not plan to stay in the exact same location for a minimum of 7 to 10 years, buying a house is financial suicide. The fees will completely consume any appreciation or equity you manage to build. You are essentially paying tens of thousands of dollars for a temporary illusion of ownership. Second is the variable of capital allocation. What are you actually buying? Robert Kiyosaki, in his foundational texts, made one brilliant observation that the middle class passionately hates. Your primary residence is not an asset, it is a liability. An asset puts money into your pocket every single month, whether you work or not. A liability takes money out of your pocket every single month. Your house demands property taxes, insurance, mortgage interest, and maintenance. It is a hungry mouth that you must constantly feed. When you rent, you are simply paying a predictable, capped expense for shelter. You take the heavy lifting of capital and deploy it into true assets, businesses, stocks, bonds, things that pay you dividends, things that generate cash flow. But we must also respect the variable of human behavior. You have to look in the mirror and ask yourself a very uncomfortable question. Are you truly disciplined? If you know, deep in your soul, that you cannot resist the urge to spend money when it is sitting in your bank account, then you need to buy a house. You need the bank to put those handcuffs on you. You need the mortgage to force you to build wealth, because left to your own devices, you will consume everything you touch. But if you are a master of your own impulses, if you can watch your peers drive brand new cars while you drive a 10-year-old sedan, if you can automate your investments so that the money disappears into index funds before you can even see it, then renting is not throwing money away. Renting is purchasing the ultimate tactical advantage, liquidity and optionality. Let us return to that office party. The pastries are gone. The congratulations have faded. Your colleague goes home to his new house. He stands in the living room, surrounded by empty walls that will soon demand expensive paint, expensive art, and expensive furniture. He hears a creak in the ceiling, and his heart rate spikes, wondering how much it will cost to fix. He looks at his bank account and sees it completely drained by the down payment. He has bought his way into the system. He is secure, but he is trapped. You go back to your rented apartment. The walls are not yours. The floor is not yours. But you open your laptop and look at your brokerage account. You see shares of 500 different companies working tirelessly to generate profits for you. You see a reserve of cash ready to be deployed the moment the market crashes and presents an opportunity. You realize that you can pack your bags tomorrow and move to Tokyo, London, or New York without asking anyone for permission. There is no absolute right or wrong answer. There is only a trade-off. Every financial decision demands a sacrifice. The universe does not give you anything for free. If you choose the path of the homebuyer, you are trading your freedom, your mobility, and your liquid cash to purchase a psychological safety net and a system of forced discipline. You are agreeing to carry the heavy burden of maintenance, taxes, and 30 years of interest payments just to eventually own the bricks that surround you. If you choose the path of the renter, you are trading the comfort of a permanent nest and the security of a fixed housing cost to retain your freedom and your capital. You are agreeing to face the relentless pressure of inflation, and you are taking on the monumental responsibility of managing your own investments without a bank forcing your hand. The greatest lie society ever told you was not that buying is good and renting is bad. The greatest lie was convincing you that there is only one valid path to a respectable life. The system wants you to buy, because when you have a 30-year mortgage, you are a compliant, obedient worker. You will not quit your job. You will not take wild entrepreneurial risks. You will put your head down and work your 80 hours a week, because the bank demands its payment on the first of the month. The truth is, both you and your colleague are paying for shelter. Both of you are writing checks to someone else. He writes it to a multi-billion-dollar banking institution to cover his interest. You write it to a landlord to cover your lease. Neither of you is living for free. The only question that actually matters is this: what are you doing with the rest of your money? Are you using it to buy heavy, immovable objects that drain your cash flow? Or are you using it to build a diversified, liquid machine that prints money while you sleep? Let us delve even deeper into the mechanics of this grand illusion to truly comprehend the gravity of the choice. Consider the physical act of signing the mortgage documents. Your colleague sat in a freezing, sterile title office. He was handed a stack of paper 50 pages thick. He was instructed to sign his name on line after line, initialing documents he barely had time to read, let alone comprehend. He signed a promissory note. He signed a deed of trust. He signed disclosures acknowledging that if he misses a few payments, the bank has the absolute legal right to seize the property, evict him, and sell the house to recoup their capital, leaving him with absolutely nothing. He pledged his future labor, his future sweat, and his future time to a corporate entity. And what did he pay for this privilege? Let us look at the closing disclosure. He paid thousands of dollars in loan origination fees. He paid for a mandatory appraisal to assure the bank that their asset was safe. He paid for title insurance to protect the bank. He paid for recording fees. He handed over a massive sum of capital just to initiate the debt. If a mutual fund charged you a 3% upfront fee just to deposit your money, you would call it a scam. You would refuse to invest. Yet, when the real estate industry charges 3 to 5% in closing costs just to buy the property, and another 6% in commissions to sell it, society calls it a brilliant investment. It is a masterpiece of marketing. Now, let us examine the true nature of equity. Your colleague boasts that a portion of his monthly payment is building equity. But what is equity really? It is phantom wealth. It is a number on a spreadsheet. Suppose his home appreciates. Suppose a surge of inflation hits the economy, driving asset prices sky high. His home is now appraised at $700,000. He feels a rush of dopamine. He feels like a financial genius. But unless he sells the home, that equity is completely inaccessible, unless he is willing to go further into debt. If he wants to touch that wealth, he must take out a home equity loan or refinance the mortgage. This means he has to borrow his own money back from the bank and pay the bank interest on the wealth he supposedly already owns. He is paying a toll just to access his own net worth. Contrast this with your liquid portfolio. When your index funds appreciate by $200,000, you do not have to borrow against them to buy groceries. You do not have to ask a loan officer for an application to access your gains. You execute a trade. The cash settles. The money is yours. It is clean, efficient, and untethered from the bureaucratic nightmare of the banking system. Let us also discuss the psychological burden of maintenance, the unquantifiable toll of being a homeowner. When you rent, your mind is free. Your weekends belong to you. If a storm blows off a few shingles, you are not spending your Saturday climbing a ladder with a hammer and a bucket of tar. You are reading a book. You are building a side business. You are spending time with your family. Your colleague, however, spends his weekends wandering the aisles of massive home improvement stores. He is constantly buying tools he will only use once. He is researching how to fix a leaking garbage disposal on the internet because hiring a professional costs too much. His property is not just consuming his money, it is consuming his cognitive bandwidth. It is draining his mental energy. He has essentially taken on a second, unpaid part-time job as a property manager and maintenance worker. And society has convinced him that this labor is a noble pursuit, rather than a massive drain on his most valuable resource, his time. Consider the concept of concentration risk. In the world of investing, putting all of your money into one single stock is considered extremely dangerous. If that company goes bankrupt, you lose everything. Diversification is the fundamental rule of wealth preservation. Yet, the average middle-class individual takes their entire life savings, takes on massive leverage, and sinks it all into one single asset, located on one single street, in one single neighborhood, in one single city. They violate the most basic rule of investing. If the local factory shuts down, destroying the local economy, the value of the house plummets. If crime increases in that specific zip code, the value plummets. If the city raises property taxes to cover budget deficits, the cost of holding the asset skyrockets. Your colleague has tied his entire financial destiny to the microscopic economic climate of a few square miles. You, on the other hand, own pieces of companies spread across the entire globe. You own technology firms in California, manufacturing plants in Asia, and pharmaceutical companies in Europe. If one sector crashes, another rises. Your wealth is shielded by the immense power of global diversification. You are not reliant on the success of a single municipal government. Let us address the emotional argument. People say they want a place that is theirs. They want to paint the walls, whatever color they want. They want their children to grow up in a stable home. These are valid emotional desires. But we must accurately price these emotions. You are paying a premium for the ability to paint a wall. You are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest to avoid dealing with a landlord. If you acknowledge that you are purchasing an emotional luxury, that is fine. But do not lie to yourself and call it an optimal financial investment. The danger arises when people confuse emotional desires with financial strategy. They buy a house they cannot truly afford because they want the feeling of ownership. They stretch their budget to the breaking point. They become house poor. They live in a magnificent structure, but they lay awake at night staring at the ceiling, paralyzed by the stress of the impending mortgage payment. They sacrifice their peace of mind for a facade of prosperity. Let us look closely at the illusion of the upgraded lifestyle. The house is a vacuum. It demands to be filled. When you rent a modest apartment, you are content with modest furniture. But when your colleague buys a $500,000 home, the old sofa suddenly looks out of place. The old television seems too small for the massive living room wall. The societal pressure to match the interior of the home to its exterior price tag is immense. So, your colleague takes out a credit card. He buys a $5,000 leather sectional. He buys a $2,000 dining room table. He finances a state-of-the-art refrigerator. The house was just the entry fee. The true cost is the lifestyle inflation that inevitably follows. The house becomes an anchor that drags him deeper into the ocean of consumer debt. Meanwhile, your lifestyle remains agile. Because you are not tied to a massive mortgage, you maintain a lean operational cost. You can weather economic storms with ease. If your income drops by 20%, you simply adjust your savings rate. Your colleague, facing the exact same income drop, edges dangerously close to foreclosure. His margin for error is razor thin. The financial system is perfectly designed to exploit our primal desire for shelter and security. The banks, the real estate agents, the title companies, the furniture stores, they all form a massive, synchronized ecosystem designed to extract capital from the working class. They use words like investment, equity, and the dream as bait. They create a culture where renting is stigmatized. They make you feel like a failure for choosing flexibility over debt. They do this because a population of heavily indebted homeowners is a highly profitable and highly controllable population. When you realize this, the entire paradigm shifts. You stop seeing the house as a golden ticket. You start seeing it for what it truly is, a highly illiquid, geographically restrictive, capital-intensive consumer good that occasionally, under the right market conditions, happens to appreciate in value. So, how do you navigate this landscape? You must adopt a radically different mindset. You must become completely detached from the emotional romanticism of bricks and mortar. If you run the numbers, and the cost of renting a property is significantly lower than the total unrecoverable costs of buying a similar property, the interest, the taxes, the maintenance, then you rent. You happily pay the landlord. You consider it the price of your freedom. But you must make a solemn vow to yourself. The capital you saved by not paying a down payment and the monthly cash flow you saved by avoiding the hidden costs of homeownership must be weaponized. It must be sent to the front lines of the financial markets. If you rent, but you spend your surplus on expensive dinners, designer clothes, and depreciating luxury cars, then you are indeed throwing your money away. You are fulfilling the prophecy of the foolish renter. You will arrive at the age of 65 with nothing but a collection of expensive memories and a mountain of anxiety. The choice is stark, and it is unforgiving. You can choose the path of your colleague. You can buy the house. You can embrace the forced savings. You can accept the heavy chains of the mortgage, the endless maintenance, and the lack of liquidity. In 30 years, you will likely have a paid-off asset. You will be safe, but you will have paid an astronomical premium in interest and lost opportunity. Or, you can choose the path of the financial predator. You can rent. You can stay light on your feet. You can hoard your cash, invest aggressively, and compound your wealth in the liquid markets. You can build a machine of passive income that eventually grows so large that it pays your rent for you indefinitely. This path requires a cold, mechanical discipline. It requires you to ignore the societal noise. It requires you to look at your colleague's new house without a single ounce of envy. Because you know the truth. You know the math. You know the exact weight of the chains he just placed around his own neck. The next time you walk into that office and you hear them talking about property values and interest rates, just listen. Listen to the subtle undercurrent of stress in their voices when they mention a broken air conditioner or a rising property tax bill. Listen to the sound of the system working exactly as it was designed to work. You are playing a different game. You are not playing the game of accumulation of heavy objects. You are playing the game of absolute, unadulterated freedom. And in that game, the person who controls the most liquid capital, the person who has the fewest obligations, the person who can adapt to any economic shift in a matter of days, that person is the true master of the board. Let them have their bricks. Let them have their 30-year contracts. You will keep your cash, you will keep your mobility, and most importantly, you will keep your life exactly where it belongs, firmly in your own hands. This is not just about real estate. This is about taking back control of your psychological programming. It is about recognizing that every narrative pushed by the mainstream financial industry has a hidden agenda. When they tell you to buy, ask yourself who profits from the transaction. The bank profits. The broker profits. The government profits through taxes. You take on 100% of the risk, 100% of the debt, and 100% of the maintenance. When you look at it through the cold, calculating lens of pure finance, the romanticism fades away instantly. You are left with numbers, and numbers do not lie. Numbers do not care about your feelings. Numbers do not care about societal approval. The numbers clearly state that liquidity and compound interest in the broader markets offer a path to wealth that does not require you to become a glorified janitor for a concrete box. So, make your choice, but make it with your eyes wide open. Do not stumble into a 30-year debt sentence simply because your parents did it or because your colleagues are doing it. Make the choice that aligns with your true desires. If you want a permanent anchor, buy the house. But if you want to remain a ghost in the machine, capable of moving anywhere, adapting to anything, and commanding a liquid fortune that can be deployed at a moment's notice, then embrace the power of the lease. Master your mind. Master your cash flow. And never let a wall of bricks dictate the boundaries of your freedom.